Welcome to this EDUcast. Headsets make the difference. Sponsored by BlueParrott and Telecom Reseller. With me today is Alex Williams, Product Manager at BlueParrott. We're talking about high noise environments, not just simply the place where you buy and use a headset at home or something like that. Headset requirements, what are attractive features about headsets, some of which you may not have thought of. We're going to go into the device landscape to talk about the territory of headsets as well. Then something which you might not have considered, and that is headset software. Headsets are no longer just simply a microphone and an earpiece. And then we're going to talk about opportunities, especially for those of you who are resellers and distributors, high noise opportunities that can make good sales. So let's start off with this picture, and I'm trying to illustrate something very important here. There's noise everywhere, but noise is a distraction. Noise is a disruption. And when I get disrupted, I find it sometimes very difficult to get back to what I was doing, and it really hurts my productivity. So let's start off, Alex, with what you consider the high noise verticals that are out there that are important to satisfy with your products.
Thanks, Gary. Basically, high noise impacts not just not just people who are sat in an office, but outside in other work environments when they have a communication need. And so within that, with the BlueParrott side of things, we really sort of determined to focus in on 4 sort of key verticals that we would call them that have noise aspects that would impact communications, and focus on that. The first one that we have here is the professional driver or fleet. So the easiest one to think with that is think commercial truck drivers, that kind of thing. They have a big need to stay communicated and stay connected all day long, all work. And then we've got the field service or what we would call workforce mobility, and that would be an easy one to think of as an example of that would be a telecom line repair person. So they're out, they're working, they might have a need to stay connected, but they are out and they are mobile, out and about. The other 2 verticals that we have here are really bounded by 4 walls, as it were. So the retail and hospitality work environment is a little bit different in that it is more geared towards back office communications, as it were. And then we have warehouse, which is, whereas the other 3 are generally communicating with other people. The warehouse environment, the users of the headsets in that situation are generally communicating with a machine interface, a computer with voice recognition. But with these verticals, all of them have the 6 items below that are common to them. So they're all typically have high noise as an element that would impede communications. They're typically bound by a time schedule with a work shift type of thing. They all have a need to be hands-free, which is where the headset is very important. They can be quite dirty or demanding, rugged type of environments in many cases. Conversations are key, and they're all in some way or other mobile. So they're not, the people in these verticals are not tied down to a single desk location. They're constantly on the move.
You've been talking about headset requirements. Headset requirements are really important. What do you think are the requirements that should be considered when selecting a headset?
So when we look at the verticals that we're focusing on, with all of them, the requirements are fairly common. They obviously, communications is absolutely paramount. So the headsets need to be reliable. They need to be able to do the job all day long, every day. Obviously, being in a high noise environment, they need to have the ability to pick up the user's voice and send it down to the other person on the other end of the line, but make it so they are clear, so the noise is not an impact. But also the user themselves needs to be able to hear the clear sound as well. Obviously, being demand environment, they've got to be able to stand up to a certain level of demanding use. So they've got to have a level of ruggedness to them. And versatility, they're not just used for plain communications, there are other uses for them as well. You know, an easy example with truck drivers might be rather than have it GPS directions on a screen, have them parted through into the headset. So you have that variability. Obviously, then for people who are having to wear a headset all day long, it's got to be comfortable. And because these are all wireless headsets that we're talking about here, you've got to have a battery life that can stand the test of time and see them through the entire workday as well.
We're talking about headsets and selecting headsets, but one of the other aspects is it should work well anywhere. What do we mean by that?
What is the environment that you find yourself in constantly? Is it an environment where if you used a little dinky headset and you dropped it, that would be the end of it, and you wouldn't be able to communicate anymore during the day? You know, that's not a good thing. So for, you know, if your work is something where you would consider it be rugged and needing that reliability, that's really where the BlueParrott headset would be worth considering.
You were talking earlier about, you know, wireless connections, but also I think about voice-controlled headsets, and that's something that requires a lot of intelligence. What do we need there?
So what we're seeing more and more in mobile environments today is the incorporation or the implementation of voice into not just straight person-to-person communications, but using voice to get stuff done. So you know, voice to machine kind of communications. So in this situation, this actually is referring to our most recent headset, the BlueParrott B550 XT, specifically, but all of the BlueParrott headsets are very good for that voice recognition into a mobile device. So you know, as an example, Siri or Google Voice, telling your device what you want it to do to get stuff done. The B550 is a little bit different in that it is also the first headset for rugged environments that incorporates its own level of voice recognition. So you don't even have to touch the headset.
I like this title, GPS on your head, and you talked about GPS a little bit earlier. Why is this valuable and what are the benefits?
Well, if we step back and we consider, you know, somebody who is mobile, they are out and about. Now, yes, they might be mobile, kind of airport to airport road warrior, but a lot of people are out in vehicles. Either their job is to be in the vehicle going from place to place, or they're using the vehicle to get to their next job. In either case, the variation on work routine means that they also have to rely on directions. And what better way for that is the GPS that we generally all have in our mobile devices. Well, it's not good to look at a screen, and it's best if you can have the voice recognition or the voice commands telling you what to do, turn left here, turn right there. And that's really where it means the GPS on your head. So the headset interfacing into your mobile device is receiving the commands, and so you don't need to look at your device, and you keep your hands on the wheel, eyes on the road, and you know what to do. So it's a safety factor as well.
You were talking about traveling on the road, and I thought this was interesting on your site, the Peek into the Cab survey. What discoveries did you make there in that survey?
So, you know, really this was targeted at our fleet over-the-road truck driver community. And it was really to identify the top issues that they face as a part of their work demands. You know, obviously if they're not moving, they're not making money, as it were. So they've got to keep going, but they've got to stay connected. But it's also just how they structure their life around it. So you know, it was very interesting hearing that you know, more than half of them admitted to using a headset not just for you know, voice communications, but also just for entertainment purposes. You know, that the majority of them use a headset, but only as a part of their work environment. They don't use a headset outside of driving. And then also, you know, just what is important to them from a feature perspective within the headsets that they use.
Considering that wearing a headset for long periods of time, to me, the comfort is very important. What should we look at for the design of comfort in headsets?
Comfort is definitely key. If you're wearing a headset all day long, it needs to be something that is not going to cause you discomfort or a level of distraction, because that's what it would end up being. It needs to not press in on your head too much, but also it needs to recognize and be adjustable, because nobody's the same size. It's not one size fits all completely. There needs to be that adjustment in that to make it that the end user can adjust it to however they best need fit. So all of these adjustment abilities and abilities to find the best fit within your headset are very, very important. Something we place a high focus on.
We started talking about high noise opportunities. What are some of the opportunities for offering headsets in these environments?
All of these figures you have here are actually taken from US census data. Right now, there are 3.5 million truck drivers in the US, but when we look down at the trends within that, I mean, Amazon is the easiest example to pick at. They ship 1.6 million packages a day when they are, not peak season. So there's a huge demand, and it's growing. Online retail grew 16% throughout 2017. So there's increasing demand. There's ever increasing demand for people within these mobile workforces.
Where does BlueParrott fit into the Jabra landscape?
So BlueParrott is a part of the GN family, and the GN family is made up of really sort of, as you can see on the pyramid here, 3 levels of type of products. We've got GN Resound, which is the medical grade, hearing aid, hearing instruments, that kind of thing. Professional grade and consumer grade is Jabra under GN, but now for the professional grade as well, we have BlueParrott, and we place it within the enterprise segment because BlueParrott headsets are primarily tools for getting a job done.
I thought this was an interesting graphic about the changing devices in this environment. Would you review this for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at the verticals, you can see, if you look straight at the devices, you can see there's a high level of commonality there, in that you may very well encounter across any of these 4 verticals mobile type of devices. It could be consumer type of devices, but they could also be expressly designed for business use. But then there are some variations. So professional driver and fleet is the simplest one to consider, because voice communications is the primary role of their job. When they're moving, they've got to stay in touch, so they're going to use smartphones and tablets primarily for that purpose. But then on the others, we have variations. So you'll see we've got, in retail and field service, we've also got the introduction of walkie-talkies or land mobile radios in use as well. And then warehouse, because warehouse is a very different use case. Typically, they'll use mobile devices that either have got scanners built in or they have separate scanners as well, just because of the different use case environment that they're in. The other one that's important to be aware of is voice platforms and applications. So warehouse is totally different in that it is really human to machine voice communications. All the other 3 are human to human communications, but the platform that they could be found on varies. So it could be mobile phone data communications, regular traditional voice, but also more and more we're seeing other implementations, which is where the UC comes in, which stands for Unified Communications. And that could be, as an example, using on your mobile device Skype for Business. You're using that for voice communications, but you're not using your regular phone implementation. That's an example of unified communications. And then the other one there that's a little harder to maybe see says PTT, or push to talk. And more what we're finding is businesses are looking at moving away from using separate land mobile radios, but are seeing if they can integrate that push to talk functionality into a single device. And that's where the push to talk and the headsets actually come in.
Many viewers think of the headsets as being intelligent. I have an intelligent Jabra headset on today, but they don't think about the software. Would you discuss the software experience for us?
The old way of thinking was a headset's a headset, it's a static thing, it doesn't need to change. Well, now what we're finding is, no, it needs to have a level of flexibility. And so that's where the software comes in. First on here, we have the Parrot app. So this is a mobile-based application. It's available on both Android and iOS operating systems. And the BlueParrott app here, it not only gives the user the ability to program the Parrot button on their headset, but it also acts as a resource for the users. So it gives them access to their user manual. It gives them access to advice on, helpful tips on getting things set up and other features as well. And then we have, because that flexibility is now a big part of the headset experience, there's going to be a need to keep the headsets current and relevant. And sometimes that involves updating the firmware that's running on the headsets. And that's where the software updater comes in. And that's a PC-based software application that is generally used to both update the firmware on the headsets and also configure some of the key settings without having to sort of fiddle around with all the buttons on the headset. It's another way of configuring the headsets as well.
That leads to my next question is, how do you deal with software partnerships? Because I know you can't develop all the software to deliver this better experience.
No, and actually, that's actually a really good question, because we have to recognize that we don't have all the answers, and other people may have a fantastic idea on how they would want to implement into the headset. And so we are working closely with some major ecosystem partners like Zello, IMPT, Kodiak, and in that situation we've built in the implementation into the BlueParrott app, but we also have a fairly robust developer ecosystem.
When I look at this next slide, it gets into that comment you were making about push to talk. Would you cover more of this for us?
Absolutely. So the push-to-talk experience, easy way to step back and think is, take a little walkie-talkie. You have to push a button to hold to speak, and when you let go, it opens up the channel to the other end. The implementation is exactly the same on a mobile device. What about pressing the Parrot button instead of having to fiddle with the screen or the device to enable that push-to-talk? So that's exactly what we've gone and done. We've done it for Zello, and we've also done it with the Kodiak backbone. And Kodiak is important to be aware of because they basically support the backbone that runs all of the mobile phone carriers' commercial push-to-talk applications.
That gets into the word compatibility. You've mentioned several.
Yes.
How do you deal with compatibility dealing with so many different vendors?
It can be a challenge, but because sometimes you'll have an app provider who has settled on their own version or their own implementation of a protocol. But the nice thing about the Kodiak situation, for example, is that they kind of created a standard, and that enabled all the mobile carriers to, if they wanted to use that standard. So it makes a much wider implementation possible. And then there are others, but that's also where, again, it comes back into our SDK. So that SDK can be available to app developers as well, or if the app developer wants to go for a more integrated solution, they might want to integrate with our Parrot app as well in working with that. Basically, when we talk about compatibility, all of the headsets that have the Parrot button are the ones, because the Parrot button is the programmable, configurable button. We've assessed a standard, a unified standard for the Parrot button. So if it has the Parrot button, whether it's B350 XT, the headset that has the Parrot button that's been around the longest, or if it's a new one that's coming out in a couple of years' time, it would still work the same with all of them. So that the sort of standardization in compatibility is very important.
You're talking about apps, and you have a BlueParrott developer zone. What's the value or benefit of dealing with that?
Right now, we have the Parrot app, our own app, that has certain implementation, certain integration into other companies' own communications apps. But we recognize that that may not be desired for all situations, and so that's where the developer zone comes in, and it gives an app developer or a company the opportunity to also differentiate with their own solution and integrate our solution into what they are doing, and hopefully for them generate some additional business as well, some incremental side of things. And we recognize also within the developer situation that a use case can be very specific. It can be very broad, but it can be very, very, very specific and individual. And so it gives a developer the opportunity to focus on that if needed.
We're talking about BlueParrott as a business. What's the business value of dealing with a BlueParrott?
So BlueParrott as a brand is, it's not a new brand. It is a brand that is recognized. Certainly in North America, it has very good brand recognition in the fleet market right now. So what that means is that already we have over 3 million professionals relying on BlueParrott headsets on a day-to-day basis. So there's history behind that. But it's not just for fleet drivers. It's also for all the other verticals as well. And just really the fact that so many people have already chosen to rely on us is indicative that it is a tool that a business can trust.
I see you have a number of products in different kinds of verticals. Would you summarize some of those for us?
Professional driver and field service, we recommend basically the same lineup because their roles may be slightly different, but their communication needs are broadly similar. Retail and hospitality, we're actually recommending one headset at this point, and that's the C400 XT, and that's the difference with that. It's the convertible headset, so it gives retail users a little bit more flexibility on how they use the headset rather than just insisting on an over-the-head situation. And then the warehouse use case, there are 3 Bluetooth headsets that we're recommending in here, and if you're eagle-eyed, you'll see at the bottom we've got the VR12 and VR11. Those are actually corded headsets that are designed expressly for warehouse use.
What are the benefits and value of selling these BlueParrott products?
So we recognize that a lot of people in a lot of the telecom reseller audience, for example, are accustomed to selling more into traditional communication type of business situations, office or contact center type of environments. Well, BlueParrott gives an opportunity for broadening that out. So you can broaden that share, but also existing businesses that somebody might be working with, they might have a need that they haven't touched on really just from being aware of it. So they can grow their share within their existing customers potentially. And also it gives a unique selling niche that they may even be able to land new customers as well. The performance standards of the BlueParrott products also give a strong competitive advantage in those demanding environments that they'd be putting into, and it really gives the resellers the opportunity to really just focus on the selling, knowing that they're not having to worry about so much of the support and everything because the infrastructure is already there.
How do I get started in building a relationship with BlueParrott?
If you're interested in carrying BlueParrott and selling BlueParrott and learning more about it, the first thing I would say would be to reach out to your distributor representative. They will guide you on board and bring you on board, and give you the access to the learning materials so you can tell that BlueParrott story, so you can familiarize yourself even more with all the information that we have created around all of the BlueParrott experience. Learn about it so you can then go out and talk to your customers, create the awareness, and again for yourself drive more demand as well.
I'd like to point out there are two good resources here about becoming an authorized reseller and learning more about BlueParrott that you should go to. We're talking about distributors, and Fontel is one of the sponsors of this EDUcast. Here's the contact information to get in touch with Fontel to continue building this relationship. I'd like to thank you very much, Alex, for today's conversation.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.